Okay, so Kyle's here as always. Slightly different format at Arsenal. Slightly different format for the podcast here. As you probably heard before, we're switching up our schedule a little bit. And for this first podcast, we're changing things up by having a roundtable here with James, not Gareth Bale, from the Big Diag. Hey, James.
Hello.
And, of course, Sam Limbert. You've heard him on the podcast several times before. Sam is just back from the game, I understand.
Yeah, just got in.
Just
and
recovered.
you will have, as much as hearing my voice on the podcast before, you now could have seen my face if you've looked at the YouTube channel.
Really? Oh, well. Oh, sorry. Yes, I know that. Yeah, I thought you were going to say something.
Usual.
I thought you were going to say something like we could see your face at the game. I don't know if you were, sit close enough to harass anybody on the pitch, but
I'm close enough to harass a linesman, but I don't think anyone would want to see my face during a game. It's not really a pretty sight, especially a game like today's.
Right? Yeah. I mean, obviously, everyone listening, you'd agree that you can't blame too much on the linesman, unfortunately, for this 2-0 loss to City. Arsenal still mixing and matching a little bit, finding some cohesion. Hopefully that's coming soon enough. What did you guys take away from the game? Hopefully we'll get to some positives soon enough, but I think we all kind of expected defensively Arsenal would be still all over the shop. Maybe not all over the shop, but slightly discoordinated with the way their defense was set up. For me, I was a little more disappointed with the way the offense failed to capitalize. I think I kind of expected that the defense would be a work in progress. But the offense, I expected at least a goal out of this game. I don't know, maybe 2-0 was exactly what everyone had expected. Yes? No?
I mean, to be honest, I kind of expected us to give it a bit more of a go. It kind of felt like City were comfortable for the vast majority of that game. It wasn't really like there was a period where we created a bit of pressure, we got some momentum going forward. It was, I don't know, it just always felt like they were holding us at arm's length. And a bit like you, I kind of feared slightly we'd be exposed defensively. And it wasn't like we got overly ripped apart. It just looked a bit shaky. But there was going forward where we couldn't really get the formation working and couldn't get the right players in the game in the right position. So when Aubameyang was up front, we didn't really set any balls in behind for him to chase. He barely had a kick until he moved out to the left. Ozil in that kind of inside right, I don't think quite worked. Mkhitaryan, I think, was pretty poor going forward. And I can't work out what we were trying to do with Aaron Ramsey playing so close to Aubameyang. So kind of whatever structure they were trying to implement in that front four, it didn't work.
Right. It was. You're right. It was a game where Arsenal definitely they struggled to. It seemed mostly City's game. Now there were Arsenal chances, but they seemed like they came in fits and starts. There was never a sustained period. I guess maybe for the with the exception of when Lacazette came in, there was that kind of that little surge. Yeah. Right when he got on the ball a few times, but other than that, it didn't seem like anything too coherent from the offense. James, I mean, did they look the front three? Because I guess we did have a front three. They didn't really drop back to help out too much. Did they look too isolated to you offensively, or is that kind of what you expected going forward here from Emery?
I mean, I didn't quite know what to expect going into this game. Obviously, seeing like all the preseason stuff, I was more concerned about what the hell are we doing with our defense. I think that for me was slightly more concerning than our offense, where I'm like, hey, we got Aubameyang and Lacazette, everything will be fine. And then, I mean, Aubameyang had a good couple of chances in there. I mean, Mesut was trying to do some like 1-2 stuff with Mkhitaryan. He was trying to do things, but they didn't really seem. They almost didn't seem to gel very well, almost. In that kind of formation they had, with Ramsey just occasionally charging forward, missing bits and bobs like he sometimes does. So I think Emery's almost like doing a bit of a troll, well, not quite a troll run, but almost trying to try things and try something a little bit different. Lots of playing out from the back, which for me I don't think worked quite so well as what he hoped for.
I think Petr Cech would agree with you on some of those backpasses.
I have issues with Petr Cech now. Oh really? Days. Get that man off the pitch, please.
Specifically with his, let's say, his inability to play out of the back, or something else. Just reaction
well, I
time.
mean, he nearly scored an own goal from the byline,
which would have been an incredible own goal.
That would have been the greatest Arsenal meme of all time. Goalkeeper scores own goal from almost behind the goal line. I've got issues with Mustafi for days. Right. But that's just my beef with Mustafi, just being a bit useless. But Petr Cech for me, yes. Obviously, Emery's trying this new kind of like super captain system where they've got about like 6 different captains. They can just pick anyone for any sort of game. But I didn't really hear much leadership from him. There's obviously that there were mics around the ground that I was picking up from the TV coverage of basically him like occasionally shouting at a defender. I'm just like, you need to be doing this throughout the entire game, Petr. Yes, he made a really good double save. But he really should have seen Sterling's shot coming from a mile off. As soon as he's kind of cutting in and about to shoot with his right, you just know he's gonna release. Bernardo's goal was pretty classy. Not many goalkeepers who could realistically get a touch on that, so I can't really whinge at him about that. But I don't think Petr Cech's delivery is as confident as it could be, and I'm just seeing last season again in him as a player. So I don't really see that he's progressed over the summer break, and I think having getting someone else in, like we bought Leno, I think almost give him a run, just see what he's like. To be honest,
I think all over the pitch, Kyle. I'm assuming with Emery, we're going to see a lot of everyone getting not everyone, but most people getting cycled in and out. I mean, even in this game, Torreira came in late, which I'm hoping he'll be more of a mainstay going forward, and he was just out because of his run in the World Cup. But I don't know. Who else would you like to see in? Who really, in your mind, deserves to be in the starting lineup that wasn't in there today?
Yeah, I think obviously the obvious choice that a lot of people have mentioned, both when he came on and had an immediate chance, and of course post-match, was Lacazette. Seemed to provide a lot of life into the side. I'm
surprised. And, are you surprised how like friendly he is with Aubameyang? We always talked about like maybe they hate each other behind this, behind the scenes. But they have a lot of good exchanges. They seem cheerful enough with each other. I would think that he would view him as an absolute rival, but they do seem to coordinate pretty well anyway.
Yeah. No, I think you look at the structure of the side. There's, you're talking about a team that even today, starting 11 have never played together in that formation or in a meaningful match. And if I have a beef with anyone, it's whoever put out the schedule for the Premier League. My goodness, it seems like
it's never random. It's never as random as it's supposed to be.
Yeah, you would think that you need to like kind of welcome the promoted teams to the league a little bit more than we do. Maybe send them away to City and Chelsea and United on their first game back in the Premier League, or first ever Premier League.
Do you think they viewed Arsenal as a promoted team with their new manager? They're just like, what is this entity? Yeah, just put them against Man City.
Yeah, welcome to the Premier League. Emery, I guess, would be the theme there. But sure. I understand that the match itself and Arsenal's performance seemed a lot worse than 2-0, and certainly could have been a lot worse than 2-0, with the own goal from Cech potentially and a few other chances that Man City missed out on. But I'm right there with you, Joel. I was more disappointed, I think, with the finishing and the lack of, killer instinct in the final third from Arsenal against Man City than I was anywhere else. You're talking about, again, a team that has never played together before, a defense that we always knew was going to be a little shaky coming into the season, especially with, our captain and most consistent defender, central defender anyway, of the last 4 or 5 seasons, 6 seasons even, in Koscielny out. He's going to be out for quite some time. The partnership in the middle of the pitch back there is always an important one, no matter who the team is. And obviously for Arsenal, and the criticism that someone like Mustafi has gotten, and rightfully so in most cases, has gotten, is always going to be there. But I actually didn't think he was that bad, to be honest with you, not considering some of the other bonehead moves that some players
Right.
made.
It's all relative. It's all relative at Arsenal.
Ultimately, when you look at the match, really, really tough to play against the defending champions. Arguably, they're going to run away with the league again this season. A lot of people are saying, I think had won it by the beginning of April. I think last year, it could even be earlier depending on, what sort of tear they go on. So even the best of Arsenal teams of old, I think, would have struggled to get a decent result against a side like Man City, flying high with the same manager for 3 years, not a whole lot changed within their starting 11, at least not their core. So, I mean, I'm actually pretty thankful it wasn't worse than 2-0 from a scoreline perspective. I mean, sure, it feels like that. But I think there's a lot of positives you can take from a team that has never played together before and has a lot of young talent, I think, that can hopefully bed into the team pretty well. And Guendouzi and Torreira and guys that, might still be a little raw in their game. But, if we get them playing a lot and good rotation from Emery, I think he has a lot more options coming off the bench than Arsene Wenger ever did. And of course, partially that's Arsene Wenger's own fault for not signing players to fill in those gaps. But, when was the last time we were able to bring up a Lacazette or Torreira and those sorts of guys off the bench into a match? Typically you're bringing in guys that, you don't want to see on the pitch, I guess, is my point with the substitutes today. So the fact that we're going to be able to rotate and hopefully find that mix that works for us, I think is an encouraging point.
Yeah, well, Sam, speaking of those options, Sam, I mean, who do you want to see coming into the squad in the starting lineup? Were you, happy with most of who was out there, or do you think some need to be immediately yanked? Or is this going to be like a months-long project for Emery to figure out his starting 11?
I mean, I think it's going to be a long-term project. I mean, the phrase that kept coming back into my head during the game was this is very much a work-in-progress side. And looking at it, he clearly still doesn't quite know the best formation to play in these sort of games, the best formation to get the best out of the different players. And I think when I saw that team on paper today, I kind of assumed it would be a flatter three in midfield with Ramsey playing deeper. And obviously that's not how it panned out. So I think it's very much a case of him working out what formation is going to work in different games and then picking the right players in terms of that formation. But I think if you look at the starting lineup today, it was near enough what I'd expect. Obviously, in terms of left back, when we have a genuine left back fit, that'll be useful. And so I fully expect Nacho Monreal to be back in next week, especially with the injury to Maitland-Niles. In terms of the goalkeeper, I know Bear was mentioning earlier about Cech dropping out. I think in terms of the fundamentals, and I know he mentioned also in terms of Cech's leadership and shouting, doesn't always get picked up on TV. Trust me, Petr Cech was shouting at people today. But I think in terms of fundamentals of goalkeeping, he's our best goalkeeper. Shot stopping, catching balls in the air, commanding his box from a handling perspective. I think he had a pretty good game, and I was, encouraged by that. But if we're going to take on the style of playing out from the back, you look at how Man City wanted to take that style on. They signed a goalkeeper to fit into that style of play. Ederson is tailor-made for that style of play. Cech is not made to play that style of play. It's not his natural game at all. And I think that's the issue. If we want to play out from the back, I haven't seen Leno enough to know if he's going to be that guy. But if we've signed him because that's the style we want to play and because he fits that mould, then why aren't we giving him an opportunity? So that's the kind of decision he's got to make there. And also in midfield, looking at when Torreira came on, I think he immediately looked to step up from what we had in there. And I'd be very interested to see Torreira and Xhaka play together. I know Guendouzi...
I was going to ask you, what did you think of Guendouzi? I feel like most people would rather see Guendouzi and Torreira, but obviously there's a little bit of Premiership experience lacking there in that duo.
Yeah, I'm very much on that. I want to see Torreira and Xhaka play together and see how that can work because, Guendouzi's, don't get me wrong, been impressive in pre-season, did some very good things today. Like when we're attacking and he gets himself on the ball and looks forward, that you can see there's a lot of talent there. You can see exactly why we signed him. But defensively, he still concerns me. And obviously, if it wasn't for that check save from Aguero, his ricket on the halfway line would have been punished. And he still looks very raw. There was a moment in the second half, I think it was for the Bernardo Silva goal, Guendouzi just looked gone in the middle of the field and he didn't track back at all. And Bernardo Silva arrives, unattended at the edge of the box. And that's where your other holding midfielder, you'd like him to have been. So I think there's still a lot of potential there, but especially next week away at Chelsea, I think it's time to see Torreira and Xhaka and Guendouzi. We're going to have cup games. We're going to have the Europa League. It's perfect for him to gain more experience to kind of make that step up, because it's not like we've just signed him from another top league. He's coming from the second division in France. It's such a major step up.
Yeah.
And, as much as he's got potential, he still looks incredibly raw. And I think Torreira and Xhaka, then we should be playing them.
Yeah, Sam, let me ask you this about Guendouzi, because at least on television, it looked like, yes, I agree with you, he wanted to get forward. He knew what he kind of wanted to do with the ball, but it seemed like there was a disconnect between what he was trying to do, because he gave the ball away a lot in that final third, through balls and so forth, and what Emery had at least instructed the forwards, Aubameyang, Lacazette, Mkhitaryan, Ozil, all those players to be doing in the runs that they were supposed to be providing for the player with the ball at his feet. Did you get that same sense watching it live in the Emirates?
Yeah, I did, and you could see in the past where if we'd played the kind of 4-3-1 formation under Arsene Wenger, especially if we had Ozil in the 10 position, he'd drop back, and it was a very obvious link between the midfield. It was very obvious he'd pass it into the central midfield. They'd have the option to pass into Ozil, although there were always options for them. Because we had Ramsey in the attacking position and playing further forward, and Ozil and Mkhitaryan wide, and they kind of wanted to come in a little bit but didn't know how far to come in, and there was just not that cohesion there, and I think that probably didn't help Guendouzi, where he wanted to get on the ball, wanted to play a forward pass, and that obvious link man to play forward to wasn't there, and he didn't know whether to go over the top for Aubameyang to try and get Aubameyang in the game, and overall it just didn't work because we couldn't get Aubameyang running at the City defence. We couldn't get him running in behind the City defence. We just didn't really feed him for the vast majority of the game, and that's something we've got to look at when you've got a player of that ability. And I felt a bit for Lacazette because he had a good pre-season. He made a difference when he came on, but I didn't have an issue with Aubameyang starting down the middle. When we've got him there, we didn't utilise him enough at all, and that's because the midfield just lacked that cohesion. And as you've all mentioned earlier, it was the first time that starting 11 have played together. You look at pre-season and Xhaka and Guendouzi as a two in midfield. I can't remember if there was a crossover when they were playing against Lazio or not, but they pretty much played no minutes together in pre-season, and suddenly that's the two we've picked against Man City. So it was kind of not ideal that the midfield were going up against Man City having not played together before.
Yeah, and there were some other aspects too. Maybe we blew past these at the beginning, but obviously there's some personnel, there's some cohesion issues, and that's always going to be the case when you've got a new group of players together, and especially a new manager. From what you guys could tell when it comes to the manager, what, if any, of today's, we want to call it a downfall, today's loss, what, if any, came down to the tactics, what you could discern of the tactics or kind of distinguish as tactics from the manager? What came down to his tactics? There were some issues, I think, with a lot of space out on the wide areas for Man City. Was that, do you think, a intentional thing by Emery to allow that space, or is that just an issue where some of our forward players weren't supporting their fullbacks? It seemed like it was. I mean, I can only imagine it was an intentional thing because they got so much space. I think it was Walker on one side, and then who was on the other side? Was it Mendy? But they got so much space down the flanks against Arsenal that I hope it was a tactical thing. We just didn't switch off that much. The players did. Well, what do you guys think of that?
I think tactically, yeah, there were some holes in that performance, and you're right about the wide areas. And it was something we were all kind of struck by early in the game, was just how unprotected Bellerin and Maitland-Niles were. And I think when you've got players like Ozil and Mkhitaryan in those wide areas, that's again why that formation didn't quite work, because we know they're not as keen to make runs back and support the fullbacks, and I think that also meant that one of the central midfielders had to come across, and then suddenly the balance went, and when Ramsey was playing high up, he wasn't dropping in as well, and it just all didn't quite gel in that midfield area for me for most of the game. And I think that was probably the biggest tactical issue that we had, and not kind of allowing ourselves to be overrun in midfield at times. And also, the playing out from the back is something is clearly he wants us to do. and clearly it's something we're going to have to get used to. And you could tell, the atmosphere in the crowd, everyone's a bit uneasy about it, because you look at the players that are trying to do it, and as you mentioned Cech earlier, and Socrates and Mustafi, they're not players that fill you with confidence, and it kind of felt like we'd play it short from a goal kick and we'd just get swarmed over and then have to end up playing it back and kicking out anyway. It just kind of felt a little bit pointless at times, and when it gets to the point that you're cheering that you've kicked a goal kick long, you kind of think, this isn't quite working in these circumstances. So I think, in principle, if we're going to play out from the back, fine. That's clearly the choice is made. We're going to have to run with it and see how it goes. But it's also reading the game situation and seeing that Man City were obviously very happy for us to do that, and being able to mix it up and not be so kind of, well, this is how we're doing it, we're just going to keep believing in it. You've got to be flexible. You've got to kind of read the situation in those occasions.
Sure, absolutely. And go ahead, Kyle.
Yeah, I was just going to mention, I think if you think about defense as a whole in the modern game, and even back when the Invincibles or before that, late 90s, when Arsene Wenger first took over, the Arsenal teams that were winning the title defended really, really well as a team. And that's not to say that every player in the starting 11 or those that played a lot were great defenders, but their team shape and, hanging guys out to dry and at least being back in a position where you're getting bodies behind the ball was, a pretty important thing, and pretty, a positive for those sides. Granted, you had a lot of English players that kind of knew what they were doing that Arsene Wenger inherited in some of those squads. So that's definitely a point, to make there. It's not necessarily something that Wenger brought players in to do, but you had a lot of players that were already there within the squad. But the point being is that I think the best teams in English football or anywhere in football today are going to defend well as a team. And you shouldn't be talking about, oh, look who's starting in the back four. You should be talking about, wow, look, just like Sam mentioned, wow, you have Ozil and Mkhitaryan both out on the wings. They don't particularly provide a whole lot of cover for those that are going to be defending in and behind them. And it's not necessarily that those two players have to get back and make challenges and win the ball back, to move forward again. But they at least have to be in a position behind the ball to receive that ball back to counterattack or move the ball up the pitch. And so I think that's the unfortunate realization that, not only do we have, a back four that hasn't played a ton together, we don't really have a starting 11, I think, that is sound up and down, those 11 players defensively. So, obviously we have to score goals to win games as well. But, if you don't defend as a team, you're always going to struggle regardless, I think, of who your back four are or who your goalkeeper is and how good, a goalkeeper might be playing out of the back. So, as much as I was positive, coming into this podcast about the result and realizing that we just played the defending champions and likely repeat champions for this year. I know it's one game in, but
easy now. Don't give them that much credit. Don't carry them to the title. I'm sure they've got some Jose Mourinho-esque second season malaise in them, somewhere. They're gonna get complacent, and that's when we'll move it. I mean that is the question. When how positive? I mean, obviously this is a weird game in a lot of ways to evaluate because first of all, it's the first Premiership game of a new manager with new players, and it's coming against a remarkable opponent, remarkable in the way they finished last season's Premiership and the way they won it. So it's really a hard game, I think, to judge any one aspect of this new Arsenal team. But still, we've got to regroup and make something of it because the next game is more the same in a way. I mean, we've got Chelsea coming up next, so. The honeymoon does have to end. If this was a honeymoon, it does have to end at some point. And I don't know how positive you guys are, Sam and James, for Chelsea next week. But what I guess the roundabout, long-winded question is, what changes, if any, do you see being brought into that game? Is it a tactical change? Is it a personnel change? Is it all the above? Is it just some more character, some more leadership? I know people were harping on about that after the match, which just, I mean, you hear that every loss. But what is it for you that Arsenal can maybe improve? Well, not improve upon, but what positives, I guess, could they leverage from this performance and bring into that Chelsea game?
I mean, for me, because we've got such a, we've got a massive problem. We technically have no left backs. Hopefully Monreal will be back for game 2 against Chelsea.
Right.
Or that's the praise. But then obviously if he gets injured, who on earth are we going to have to put there? Are we going to have to put Lichtsteiner back out on the left flank where credit's due? He did fairly well playing in the wrong position. I remember that time last season where we just decided to lob Bellerin on the left wing for, the hell of it.
Because why not?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, why not? Just play Cole Jenkinson there. Yeah, why not? But it's really a case of I would love to see go back to the days of 2 guys up top, because but going back to the old like Bergkamp Omri era where you've either got one playing off the other or you've got like the old traditional 4-4-2. I would just love to see Aubameyang, Lacazette starting up top, both together at the same time. I know he'll never do it in a million years, but I can live in dreamland.
You really don't think so? Because I feel like after today, there might be a strong urge or a strong push for him to do that. Maybe he sees some value to it. I don't know.
There could be, but he'd obviously have to pick the right amount of players to work with them to then obviously not only help out the defense, but then also help out the offense.
Yeah.
So he'd have to really get the tactics right. Sideshow Bob looked quite good for us in midfield, considering he's 19, for goodness sake. I thought for a 19-year-old being flung in to, first game of the Premier League, first game at the Emirates, first game against, Man City, current champions, I thought he did pretty well for a 19-year-old. If I was in his position, I'd probably just cry and sit in the middle of the pitch and probably just give up and want to be subbed. I'd be like, it's too much. But no, I don't think. I think Torreira would be a better choice in there, either partnered with Xhaka, or if we really want to play out from the back, get Big El Neni in there. Swap big hair for slightly less big hair, and get El Neni, who we know is very good with the ball at his feet. He's very good at getting passes. And if you really want someone who's gonna like receive a ball, take it a little bit forward, look for the options, make a good clinical pass to someone on the wing or someone slightly further in front. So a player like El Neni, for me, is much better at that job than Xhaka is. I mean, yes, Xhaka's got, a foot like a traction engine when he wants it. Yes, he can score a wonder strike when he wants. But at times, he doesn't have that tracking back that El Neni does. And he almost doesn't have that, like, sort of almost tactical awareness at times, which I think sometimes Xhaka lacks from. But Socrates didn't look too bad, although no one can pronounce his surname properly except Sam.
Papastathopoulos.
There we go. There's a second. We've got two people that can pronounce his name right. I just call him Socrates to not insult the Greek people. And obviously, once we got Monreal back, we'll have a hell of a lot more experience at the back. I don't know whether he'll flip-flop Bellerin, Lichtsteiner, like one or the other. I'm just sad Callum Chambers isn't there, but then I'm bitter because I love Cal. He didn't really do too good at Fulham. Tears cry, but hey. But I'd love to see two up top. I'd love to see Elneny in the squad. And then just kind of, we've almost got to kind of get that core down the middle sorted. Once we've got the core down the middle sorted, then we can, spread out from there and sort out all the other positions around it. Because last season, Man City had a quality core because you had Aguero, then you had Kevin De Bruyne, and then you had everyone else behind them too as like your kind of central core, and then everything spread out from there. Whereas I don't think we've ever had that kind of since, the good old days. We haven't really had that kind of central, like, this is the core. This is our core man up top, core man in midfield, core man in defence, and our core goalie. We haven't really had that spine to work from. We've always been a little bit now disjointed. But I think once Emery finds that, and finds a group of players that really work well together and really, crack on, I think we could take it to Chelsea, although they did batter Huddersfield. But then it is only Huddersfield, so meh.
Sure, yeah,
yeah.
I feel like most people could batter Huddersfield, but I mean, well, let's do this. Time for the tough questions. I mean, I don't know how we're going to do this going forward in the long run, since we're having a more sparse podcast schedule, everyone out there listening, than the last several seasons. But we will still try to do our scoreline predictions. Maybe that's something we can bring to bear on YouTube. You can see those on the YouTube. While we got you all here, James, maybe we can start with you. Although you just gave us your rundown of the Chelsea game coming up here. So maybe we'll start with Kyle. What would you predict, Kyle, for the scoreline for the Chelsea game? And this is going to be for everyone too. I mean, everyone's going to have to give their own scoreline. So prepare yourselves.
I'm going to plan for the worst, but I'm going to be a little bit more positive in my scoreline, even though I might be wrong here. I'm going to go with a 1-1 draw.
Sorry, go ahead.
To provide I want to commend James for his point around the core, because, I mean, as maybe obvious as it is, I think it's 100% true, which is why it makes it so weird that Chambers went out on loan, because, we don't really have another center back other than Rob Holding, which is a little bit terrifying, especially with Koscielny out for so long. But I think the point is, as much as we have kind of more personnel to work with this season than ever before, at least in the last 10 years or so, we sit here yet again trying to figure out who our central midfielder, who that pairing is going to be, especially from a defensive standpoint or a holding standpoint. Is it going to be Jacques and Torreira? Is it going to be Guendouzi and El Neni? Is it going to be El Neni and Xhaka? Or, there's a lot of different combinations, which is a great thing, but we also don't have it figured out like a lot of other top sides do and have been playing together for quite some time. And when you don't have the center of the midfield figured out, a lot of other things suffer around the pitch. So I think, to James' point, to a lot of people's points, if we can figure out the best combinations, mixing and matching based on the opponents and the tactics that Emery wants to play, that central of midfield, I think Arsenal will be in much better shape than we saw them today.
Yeah, it is true that all the best teams, even the ones with amazing depth, have that core that they can, sometimes it's a very small core, but it at least gives that kind of solidarity that the rest of the team can build off of.
Right.
And we have not had that since, dare I say it, I think even more recently. You would say probably the most recent core, quote-unquote core for Arsenal, was probably something that had a Fabregas and Van Persie in there, although Van Persie was injured a lot, so maybe he wasn't part of a core per se. Okay. That's my most recent core, but let's not dwell on the cores. We'll give the new guys here a little bit more time to think over the scorelines. I'll go next. For Chelsea, I'm going to say it's going to be a 2-1 loss. 2-1 loss. So
the
we
humanity.
I've got the negativity out of our system, hopefully. Sam, what do you think will be the scoreline for the Chelsea game?
Well, I'm going to hit you up with some positivity. I probably shouldn't be saying this, given we just lost 2-0, but I kind of think, the Chelsea game for me is much more of a barometer of where we're going to be, because let's be realistic, Manchester City is not a team we're going to be competing with this season. They're probably already, we've seen the best team we're going to see at the Emirates this season. They looked like a team that were very comfortable in what they were doing, very knowledgeable in what they were doing, and looked like a team in the third year of a process with Guardiola. We very much look like a team in the beginnings of a process with a different manager. But I think next week is much more of a barometer, because Chelsea are going to be a team we're competing with. They are also got their own issue. They've got a new goalkeeper to bed in. They've got, centre forward issues, because Morata's still absolute garbage. Don't know what Giroud's going to be like against Arsenal. That would be weird seeing that if he plays. But they have a few issues themselves. They are far from the finished article, and are obviously trying to implement a new style of play under a new manager. So I think that game is going to be much more of a kind of show of where we are and how good our pre-season's been or not.
Just say it, Sam. So 3-0 to the Arsenal? Is that what you were getting at?
I was going to say 3-1. Genuinely,
oh wow!
I know that's a big wave of positivity, but I don't know, I have a feeling that we'll be in a slightly better position than they will be. Okay, they obviously won this weekend, but as we said, Huddersfield are not hardly the strongest opposition, and I think we can take the motivation from the City game and say, right, this is what we've got to get to. We'll bring Torreira in, we'll get more balance in the back four with Monreal available again, and hopefully you can kind of get the balance right in that attacking formation. And I think that this game for me is kind of, for so long we've looked at it, we'll probably beat the lower teams in the league, but then when it comes to the games against the top six, we'll wilt away, especially away from home, and we won't really be competitive. This is the first opportunity to say, right, this is going to be different. We are going to be able to compete away from home in the top six. And Chelsea are a side that if we want to get back in the top four, we have to be beating, because they are there for the taking in that race. So, yeah, I'm going to be positive and say we can win that.
So 3-1 is what I'm writing down here, just for.
I was totally kidding, but we'll take it.
Yeah, we love it. We love it. All right. So James, yeah. So
Ooh,
what are you thinking?
I was also sneaking a feeling of a draw. I did have the 1-1 planned in my head, but I think that's taken already. I'm going to go ambitious and go. There's going to be goals in this game. We go 2-2. A 2-2 draw.
See, that was a scenario that I had briefly played out in my mind, but then I realized my Arsenal disappointment, my spidey sense for Arsenal disappointment was too strong, and I knew what would happen was, in my mind, there was a 2-2 draw where we leveled up at the last second, but then I just kind of regress to a 2-1 and say that'll be the disappointment, and it'll be we almost get that second goal to tie it up, and we just never get it. So
we are away from home, which infinitely means we will be rubbish. But considering what our performance like away was last season, we could get absolutely battered, but there's a glimmer of hope that we might actually score some goals. And you know what? I'm going to hope for a 2-2. A very hopeful 2-2.
Okay. All right. So that's what I got you down for. And I think, that almost about does it for us here on this podcast, everyone listening. I don't know what pieces of housekeeping we have for you, other than maybe there is, a little bit different schedule in terms of the podcast, but we'll be supplementing that schedule change with plenty more stuff on our YouTube channel. So one thing we do want to encourage you guys to participate in, we've done this in the past, but I think now we're primed to go more than ever, is having people bring in, or having you guys out there send in your 1 minute. I think 1 minute is the top for a review. Oh, anyway, it's a review for each game, your review, or it can be, disparate, unrelated thoughts. That's fine too, but preferably a 1 minute game review that you will send, and that is able to be sent via the ArsenalReviewUSA.com website. So I think at the bottom of the page, Kyle, is where they go.
Correct. We'll set up a dedicated page for the 1 minute reviews here in the next week or so. But if you go down to the footer, on the right-hand side is where you can upload your video and then tell us a little bit about yourself. Make sure you include your branch if you're associated with a Arsenal America branch or a supporters group somewhere in the world, and then your Twitter handle if you want. And we'll comb through them, pick the best ones, make sure that they're young ear friendly. Try to keep it relatively calm and PG-13. Let's not go on the explicit rants that some other channels tend to promote. We're not trying to go down that route. We just want to give,
you can. We just may not use it.
We will probably, we'll try to get as many as we can posted. We wanted to kind of broaden the base of people that are able to get in, just their thoughts in a quick, succinct manner after each match. If you have any issues uploading your video, just let us know. But definitely something we're going to be focusing on throughout the year. And as Joel mentioned, every other week for the podcast, or when we, I guess if we do a special one in between, we'll certainly let you know. Just a lot of different ways to get involved, and we're gonna, a lot of that will be with the YouTube channel or just on our various social media accounts that we've had for quite some time, but haven't necessarily done, use some of the features or whatever that we have at our disposal. I think that's it. Oh, the other thing, last thing, one more housekeeping.
One more thing.
Sorry, and then you can wrap it up, Joel. Is we did get our hands on, hopefully, Sam can confirm this, a few extra copies of today's.
Sam is furiously sweating as he realizes he did not pick up these things.
Oh no, I can confirm. I did get it.
Yes. All right. So yeah, just like the end, so for those of you that don't know or forgotten, Joel and I had a chance to go to the Burnley match, Arsene Wenger's last match. So we got our hands on some extra copies. Oh, actually, we didn't, but we should have. We got our hands, on a copy of the match program, which was, really cool to have that as kind of a memento. Well, obviously, having a new manager for the first time in 22 seasons is also a momentous occasion. So we got our hands on a couple extra copies of the program. Obviously the game didn't go as we had hoped, but the program is still a nice memento, a nice little souvenir to take away from a historic day at the club. So we'll give away about 3 copies of that throughout the next couple months or so. We obviously have to get them from Sam in order to ship them to you guys who are. So we have a number of copies to give away of today's or the Man City Arsenal match day program, which has
Sam's not doing next day air on those shipments, huh?
Well, he can if he wants, but I wasn't going to make him. But yeah, then keep your eyes open for the usual contests, and obviously with the podcast and doing some different things intermittently throughout the time that we normally would have had a podcast each week. Going to every other week or so. It will vary the schedule on when and if we give things away on the show as well. But just keep your eyes open because we'll do all the usual stuff we've done in the past as well.
Right. And of course, we don't want to miss the chance to cross-promote thebigdiag.com. You'll be hearing and seeing a lot more of Sam and James here on this podcast and through our channels, but also through their own. So Sam, James, both of you, either one of you want to say anything you guys are working on here or looking forward to in the season besides writing more match reviews about hopefully not losses?
Well, yeah, that would be nice. But obviously, as you mentioned, we're working a lot closer with Arsenal Review USA this year. My face has appeared on YouTube a couple of times already. Me trying to not look too awkward doing a stadium tour was quite fun. So have a look at that.
I think you generally achieved it.
I think so.
Well.
It's a process, Sam.
The big group of French students looked very confused at me in the press conference room. That's a different issue. But we're obviously partnering with you guys this year. So the blog, which was on thebigdiag.com, which I've been writing, that has now kind of migrated to the Arsenal Review USA website. So if you go to thebigdiag.com, that just relocates there, and you can find all the stuff we're going to be writing this year on that. We're obviously going to have our own podcast from next week. We'll be back on with the Big Diag podcast. So if there's weeks where you haven't got your Arsenal Review USA fix for any reason, then we'll be plugging away on the Big Diag, so you can subscribe to that in all the usual podcasting places. And yeah, we'll be helping out with the video stuff on Arsenal Review USA as well. So that's pretty much where we're going to be this year.
Cool. Yeah, sounds like a plan. We appreciate that. We appreciate everyone out there listening to all this, and yeah, it'll be nice for all of you to hear from the 4 of us, I think, through the rest of the season. A little bit different spin from having some people there who actually get to go to most of the games. That's always nice. Sometimes it's not so nice, but as Sam mentioned before, it's nice to always be able to influence the linesman, things like that.
That's right.
Oh, I can tell you from experience, Sam does try to influence the linesman as much as possible in obviously the most kind and generous ways that he can. Yeah.
I mean, we generally, I think we all know the main referees and the 4th officials by name. Sam, are you actually on a first name basis with any of the linesmen? Or do you actually know who they are?
To be honest, I've probably called them most names except their actual name. So the names I've used for them probably aren't their real names. So I'm not really on first name basis, unfortunately.
Yeah. So they don't respond to them, in other words, usually. They don't wheel around and look at you.
Not yet, no. I mean, I'm going to keep trying, but I'll maybe I have to change my approach to different ways. I'll see how it goes this year.
They don't take the earpiece out.
Yeah, I'm going to have to work on it a bit.
Sure. All right. Well, that ladies and gentlemen, that's the crew for this season. Sam, James, and of course Kyle and myself, Joel here, and we'll hopefully be with you. I think we can make it another season here, right? Yeah, we've all got the stomach for it. I think generally, though, to be fair, there is for me anyway, it's just positive to see something new here at Arsenal, and if not from the players, just a new manager and a new approach, a new willingness to kind of do something else, try something else. So it'll be it'll be an exciting season, I think. And that's saying a lot after losing your first game. Usually we don't usually lose first games, but we have in the past, and that's not. This is not the kind of feeling that we usually have after those games. So I think that's a start. We'll see how it goes from here. Obviously, we'll be with you the entire season through a multitude of channels, the podcast included. So I guess we'll get in touch with you on the other side of the Chelsea and West Ham games, since there is no podcast next weekend. So pretty much every other weekend here. So until then, as always, remember, support the Arsenal and have a good week.